Hello, this is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose Dylan, Google Podcast, Spotify, Spreaker, iHeartRadio. This is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose Dylan. Alright, got some good stuff today, I always say that, I guess, but the good thing that you guys are going to be looking forward to. I realized that in my last few podcasts, I'm missing kind of like a sort of cliffhanger, I guess. You know, the thing you can look forward to later in the podcast. But yeah, I'm going to give 5 predictions, or I guess hot takes, for next NFL season. And, you know, I think some might surprise you. Alright, so, Tua was on the Dan Le Batard show, and, spoke about Brian Flores, kind of compared, talked about the differences between how Flores coached him, and Mike McDaniel. Obviously, we have all seen a drastic improvement from Tua, since Mike McDaniel arrived. You know, you could obviously, when Brian Flores was there, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle weren't, so it could very well be Waddle and Tyreek Hill that changed him, not Mike McDaniel. But Tua seems to think otherwise, as he pretty much talked about how he really felt he didn't belong on the team as a member, like under Brian Flores' coaching. And Brian Flores, I always thought, was a pretty smart coach. From what I can tell about his firing, he got fired because of his personality. Like, he was an ass. That's what I understood from the reports after he got fired. It wasn't a lack of talent as a head coach. It was the fact that he couldn't get along with the GM or the quarterback of the team, and that's something you should be able to do as a coach. And as I've said before about Tua, I don't think he's very talented. As of now, I think he's the weak link of that 2020 class that consisted of him, Herbert, Burrow, and Jordan Love. I think Burrow's been to a Super Bowl without a good O-line. He went toe-to-toe. He almost won the Super Bowl. He beat Patrick Mahomes. So Burrow has been the best. Herbert has been the most talented, I think. And Jordan Love just looking better and better every game. So Tua is kind of the weak link there. You know, he hasn't made a Super Bowl. He doesn't appear to be very talented. But like I said about Brock Purdy and Tua, they appear... Like, sometimes it's not about having a crazy good quarterback that can throw the ball 100 yards. It's about having the right guy, the right fit. And Tua is the right fit for the Dolphins. And I think their GM understood that. You know, so when Brian Flores was questioning him, I think that ultimately led to his firing. But the main point I'm trying to make here is that it's another member of Belichick's coaching tree to flop. And I do feel like all I do is diminish Bill Belichick's legacy. Obviously, he is the greatest coach ever. I have said he's the best defensive mind in NFL history. Obviously the most successful coach, but there are flaws that are hard to ignore. You know, he is below 500 without Brady. When he coached the Browns, he initially failed with the Browns before he went to the Patriots and Tom Brady and found great success. You know, so that's a flaw. And the fact that his coaching tree hasn't been successful. Josh McDaniels just got fired. Matt Patricia was a major flop. He couldn't get along with Matt Stafford. Every coach, and the Lions went through a lot in the last 10 years. every coach for the Lions got along with Matt Stafford except for Matt Patricia. And Joe Judge was a major failure. Bill O'Brien had some good years, but ultimately got himself fired there. And it's just the people that follow in Belichick's footsteps tend to have a lack of success. So for a man who is considered to be the greatest coach of all time, the guys who learned under him are finding very little success. All right, let's get a little more positive here. Bo Nix. I know I acknowledged this on yesterday's podcast. I know it's the preseason. Not a huge deal, but he has scored on 6 of his 7 drives. He has a 116 passer rating in the postseason. And like I said, with these rookies, all we know about them right now is what we're seeing in this preseason. And for the record, I'm seeing a lot of what I saw in college, which isn't a bad thing in Bo Nix's case. Very accurate, very efficient, very smart with the ball. I think it's getting clearer and clearer that he's going to be the starter. I don't see, after the last 2 weeks, I don't see any reason the Broncos go with anyone other than Bo Nix. I don't see why they would start Zach Wilson over him. I mean, certainly not Zach Wilson. If it was an experienced backup who was somewhat successful, I would understand. Like Jacoby Brissett, not a great quarterback, but he has experience. I would understand him starting over Bo Nix, but the big thing with this is if Sean Payton succeeds with Bo Nix and turns the Broncos around completely, like he turned the Saints around, my opinion doesn't change on Sean Payton at all. I still think he's a great coach. I think most people still think he's a great coach. Some people are down on him after last year, but as I've said, that team, that roster should not have been 7-10. And they're not going to make the playoffs this year, but Bo Nix, I think a big thing with Bo Nix is he's like 23, 24 right now. Like, he's very experienced coming into the league. Like, it might mean a shorter career, but he's going to be very successful in his first few years in the league. But anyway, if Sean Payton has a good if Bo Nix and Sean Payton completely turn the franchise around these next 2 years, my opinion kind of changes on Russell Wilson. Like Russell Wilson is a guy who he had 5 good years with the Seahawks. He won a Super Bowl, should have won 2. That was Pete Carroll's fault, not Russell Wilson's. But yeah, his first 5 years in the league, he was really good. Right, and he had a pretty solid completion percentage. He actually led the league in touchdowns in 2017. Very little interceptions. Up until 2021, he was a really good, or 2020, sorry, when Seahawks, they went 12-4. Wilson had 40 touchdowns. So up until 2020, Wilson was a very good, seen as one of the top quarterbacks in the league. But after 2016, his success in the playoffs is not exactly legit. In his first 4 years, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, he was 7-3 in the playoffs. From 2016 to 2020, he has 2 playoff wins and 4 losses. His completion percentage is low. His quarterback rating is nothing to write home about. Back in 2020, his quarterback rating was 72. So, my thing with Wilson is after 2015, he was more of a regular season quarterback until 2021, when he joined the Broncos, and he wasn't even that. He wasn't even a regular season quarterback. So, if this year is successful for the Broncos, I start to see Russell Wilson. I can't help but see Russell Wilson in a slightly different light than I saw him before. Right now I see him as a Hall of Famer, in spite of the last 2 years. I think he's still a very fantastic quarterback with a great career. But, it is hard to ignore. His postseason success came when he had a great defense. And once that defense dispersed, he won 2 playoff games in 5-6 years. So, if this roster is more successful with Bo Nix than it was with Russell Wilson, no matter how old he is, I have some questions. Alright, so Ian O'Connor is writing a book on Aaron Rodgers right now. But he was on The Herd yesterday, spoke about how the Jets, their season, if it doesn't start right, could fall off the rails pretty quickly. I feel like that's most teams. I don't know if that's just a Jets thing. Most teams, if they lose momentum early, it's going to take them a bit to gain it back. The problem is they have a lot of guys who are going to be looking to sign deals pretty soon. Sauce Gardner's going to want an extension. Garrett Wilson. Breece Hall is definitely going to want an extension. Quinn Williams. All their young guys that are very talented and going to be key if they want to turn their franchise around, they're going to be up for contract. So if this year is disappointing, some of those guys are going to be leaving, and that's going to put a big hole in the Jets. I still have hope for them. I do. But his assessment isn't necessarily wrong. And Aaron Rodgers, he isn't used to getting off to slow starts. We saw, in fact, the last season in Green Bay, they got off to a slow start. It took them a while to gain momentum, and by the time they did, it was too late. I know they could have made the playoffs if they beat the Lions, but I think they could have been better than they were if they didn't lose momentum so quickly. And I think part of that is Rodgers is kind of on the decline right now. You remember back in 2016, the Packers were 4-6, and then they ran the table all the way to the NFC Championship. So Rodgers back then, when he was in his prime, once he turned it on, he was probably the best quarterback in football at the time. But 2022, his last full year, he wasn't the same guy. So the Jets do have to be careful. Listen, if they open up with a loss to San Francisco, I don't think it's going to be a horrible thing for them. But they better hope they get off to a solid start to gain momentum very early. Right? Listen. Because especially when you look at their schedule, after the Niners, they get the Titans, the Pats. They should get the upper hand on the Broncos unless Bo Nix is something really special. And then the Vikings, who have Sam Darnold as their quarterback. And then after that, it's the Bills, so it's slightly harder there. Get a bit of a break with the Steelers and Pats the next 2 weeks. Then the Texans. It's going to be tough. And they got the Cardinals, Colts, Seahawks, all teams that can beat. Jags. They don't have a terribly hard schedule. They have some winnable games on there, so getting off to a good start, going into the bye week in week 12. Say you're 8-3, 7-4. That's probably a good spot to be in for the Jets. All right. So CeeDee Lamb had a pretty cryptic post on Instagram of Tobey Maguire as the Black Spider-Man. What that means, I don't know. I'm not going to try to interpret what message he was trying to send. I don't know. It really feels like the beginning of the end in Dallas. Even though they're probably going to sign CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott, it's not going to be the same. And credit where credit is due. They win in the regular season. They get to the playoffs. But they don't win. And it's not going to get any easier when they have no salary cap. And they're in cap hell. It's only going to get harder for them. So, like I said it before, I'll say it for the 1,000th time. They trapped themselves by paying Dak so long ago. They didn't consider the future. They didn't consider CeeDee Lamb was going to want to get paid in a few years. Dak's going to want an extension. They didn't consider all that. They made an impulsive move to pay Dak, and now they're in a spot where they have to pay both of them. You got to bring Dak back, because if not, you're getting Cooper Rush. And you also have to bring CeeDee Lamb back, because if you don't have him, bringing Dak back is not going to mean much. You still have a talented quarterback, but you got no one for him to throw the ball to, except for who? Brandon Cooks? So they really dug themselves quite the hole here, and it's going to take forever to get out. All right, so Justin Herbert returned after 3 weeks off from his plantar fascia injury. Jim Harbaugh spoke about it. Very optimistic about how Justin Herbert is doing and his status with the team. I really think they found the right coach with Jim Harbaugh. I know his first stint in the NFL wasn't exactly what everyone desired, but he did make a Super Bowl with Colin Kaepernick as his quarterback. So, that's hard to ignore. He did fantastic at Michigan. And, I think he's going to do great here, too. With Justin Herbert as his quarterback. And honestly, Harbaugh, I think, is the coach Herbert needed. Because they pretty much tried everything else. And none of it's working. So, Jim Harbaugh, he's the best coach Herbert's had, and I'm going to hope that I got them making the playoffs this year. But to see. I mean, it's hard to ignore. I have thought the Chargers would be making the playoffs for years now, and they haven't. But Jim Harbaugh, last time he was in the NFL, he had 3 really good years with the Niners: 13-3, 11-4, 12-4, then 8-8, and then he got booted. So I think we're looking at a turnaround for Herbert's career here. All right, so Jaden Daniels was officially named the starter at Washington. And you know what? Every day I like them more than the Giants. And like I said, I think Jaden Daniels is going to be a little bit reckless, have a low completion percentage, but he's going to show a lot of athleticism and a lot of potential. Very similar to Lamar Jackson. Now, I have no idea if he'll be a 2-time MVP, but I like the same thing about him as I do about Bo Nix. They're both like 23, 24. So they have a big gap on the rest of the class in experience. Like Drake May is 21, and he showed some potential in that preseason game, but we have no idea what we're looking at with him. We don't. And with Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels, they were in college longer, and they're both showing in this preseason that what we saw in college wasn't untrue. All right, let's get into my predictions for this upcoming NFL season, or my hot takes, I guess. I mean, obviously what I mean by that is you might dispute with them, but I think they're reasonable. So, me talking about Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix actually segues into my first bold prediction that Bo Nix wins Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think he is going to have a great season from a passing standpoint. I think he's going to have a similar season to Justin Herbert when he was first with the Chargers. Now, Herbert came out of nowhere. I think Bo Nix, some people will expect. So I don't think it's unreasonable that he wins Offensive Rookie of the Year, but that is my first hot take for next NFL season. Next one is the Dolphins, who were the number 1 offense last year. I have them missing out on the playoffs, being third in the AFC East. Listen, I mean, I have defended the Dolphins a lot, so you can't say I hate them, but I think the Jets have gotten better, and I don't think the Bills are as bad as people think. And also Josh Allen, listen, way more useful than Tua. The Bills are also better from a defensive standpoint as well than the Dolphins. I think the Bills have the edge on the Dolphins in spite of how explosive their offense will be. And they're going to miss out on the postseason. Next one is that the Texans make the AFC Championship. Improve their defense. CJ Stroud is a year older. They got Tank Dell, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs. They added Joe Mixon. Their team is stacked. And I have them playing the Bengals, and I know it is tough to believe that the Chiefs will miss the AFC Championship this year, but I think, considering their performance last year, don't forget, in the regular season, they may have eked out a win in the Super Bowl, but That was the weakest we've ever seen their offense in the regular season. By far. It's not even close. So, I got the Texans going to the AFC Championship, possibly upsetting the Chiefs, depending on how the playoffs shakes out. But yeah. My next bold prediction is that Breece Hall wins Offensive Player of the Year. Listen, he is... I'm starting to believe, I think, a top 3 running back in the league. You know, obviously CMC is the best. It's hard to believe that he won't win Offensive Player of the Year because CMC is such a threat. But he has a hamstring injury. And I think the Jets are going to be more reliant on Breece Hall than Aaron Rodgers, if they're smart. Because, listen, I know you're probably getting tired of hearing this if you're a Jet fan, but Aaron Rodgers is a 40-year-old coming off of surgery. You have a very versatile running back that can take the load off of him. Like, I would understand if you don't have anyone to take the load off him, if you're going to... Like, if you want to rely on Aaron Rodgers and you didn't have Breece Hall, I would understand that, but you do. So why in the hell would you not use him? Because you can have it both ways. You can have Aaron Rodgers not throw the ball 50 times a game, but because you have Aaron Rodgers instead of Zach Wilson, you also need Breece Hall to have 30 touches a game. You know, so... Like, that was the big problem last year, because you can't have Breece Hall do everything. But once you take the ball out of his hands, something bad happens because you had Zach Wilson. Now, you have Aaron Rodgers, who is much smarter, much more experienced. And I think he still has a better arm than Zach Wilson. So that's going to be a big difference there. And I think Breece Hall is going to be the best player on the Jets this year and the best offensive player in the league in the regular season. All right. My last hot take for this NFL season is that the Coach of the Year is, for it, Sean Payton. I know I might be a little higher on him than a lot of other people are, but I think the Broncos are in for a big jump. And if it's not him, I think it's going to be Jim Harbaugh. Meaning, the Coach of the Year is coming from the AFC West. You know, so I know Sean Payton, he's older, but I think there's a very real possibility he wins Coach of the Year this year. So just to review it, I got Bo Nix winning Rookie of the Year, Breece Hall winning Offensive Player of the Year, what else did I say? Texans AFC Championship, Dolphins missing the playoffs. And finally, Sean Payton wins Coach of the Year. Call me crazy, but I can see it happening. All right, moving on. Gerard Mayo, the coach of the Patriots, has reportedly not made a decision for Week 1 starter. Honestly, I don't see how. We only have one preseason game from Drake May. I don't know if that's enough to say he's the starter. I don't really think they have a good option. The quarterbacks since Tom Brady are almost as bad as the Broncos since Peyton Manning. Like, they've had Cam Newton, who's talented, but he was aging. He was on his way out. when he was with the Patriots. And then who else? Bailey Zappi and Mac Jones. Their quarterbacks are a rough scene. As far as as far as the Broncos quarterbacks with Peyton Manning, I think it's even worse. For now, I mean, they've had longer to have a sad history. Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch was a big bust. Brock Osweiler, Case Keenum was there for a second. Joe Flacco, they tried that. And listen, Joe Flacco was never... he did win a Super Bowl and an MVP. No, he didn't win MVP. Sorry. He did win a Super Bowl. But, you got Flacco out of his prime. Brandon Allen. Drew Lock was rough. Teddy Bridgewater was okay. And then you had Russell Wilson, who was another player, won a Super Bowl. Was in the running for MVP a lot, but never got a vote. And he was out of his prime. So, really, the Broncos, since Peyton Manning, have only had quarterbacks that flopped or were once good, but were out of their prime by the time they got to the Broncos. And because of the Patriots' lack of ability to draft offensive players well, it's hard for me to believe in them to, not have the same thing happen to them. Like, so far, they're on a similar path where they had an out-of-his-prime Cam Newton, Mac Jones, who busted, and Bailey Zappi, who was never good. So, we'll see. Maybe Drake May turns it around, but I have no idea. Alright. So, Julian Edelman actually called out Lamar for having a lack of playoff success. And listen, I think a lot of great quarterbacks have actually started off their careers with a lack of playoff success. Lamar is a little older than I always think he is for some reason. He is 27. I keep thinking he's like 25 or 24. Remember, Peyton Manning, he had playoff struggles when he was younger. Went on to be one of the best ever, and quite frankly, there are 3 quarterbacks that I think are top 10 or at minimum top 12 ever that have, actually 4, I can think of 5, holy crap, 5 quarterbacks in the top 12 quarterbacks ever that only have 1 Super Bowl. Brett Favre, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Dan Marino. Those 4. Wait. Hang on. Brees, Favre, Dan Marino, Aaron Rodgers. Who was my other one? Damn it. Oh, Steve Young. Okay. I think most people would agree those 5 only had 1 Super Bowl. Damn it, Peyton Manning. All right, 6. 6 quarterbacks that I think most people would agree are in the top 12. Only one Super Bowl. I mean, Peyton Manning won 2, but I always say that second one was not him, it was the defense. In the second Super Bowl run, I think Brock Osweiler had better stats that year than he did. Peyton Manning had 9 touchdowns and 17 picks in that year. So really, in Peyton Manning's prime, and Rodgers' prime, and Steve Young, and Brett Favre, and Dan Marino, they all had their playoff struggles. And they're still all-time greats. Now, Lamar Jackson, I think, does have potential to be great in the playoffs. It is also worth noting that he's in a stacked AFC, right? He has had to deal with Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert's going to be coming. He's coming. He is Like, if Jim Harbaugh's the right coach and they start to build their roster, he's going to be on his way. And also, not to mention, Josh Allen. So, I think Lamar will get to the point. I think he will win a Super Bowl or two in his career. But as of now, with the gauntlet that the AFC is, it's going to be tough. It ain't going to be easy for him. But I think he can overcome it. Alright, so Bill Belichick says if anyone can pull off a three-peat, the first one in NFL history is the Chiefs. And as I've said, I don't see why they can't, because even without a receiver, last year they still made it work. I don't think they will, because that offense last year was the weakest we've ever seen. And they weren't lucky. I'm not saying that, but that offense last year took a big drop in production. So I don't see... I don't know. I feel like I'm repeating what happened with the Patriots, even though they haven't reached that level yet. They're not even halfway to what the Patriots were, but... Well, actually they are. They have... Okay, anyway. Doesn't matter. They're only halfway to what the Patriots were. But it's like every year I would always think there's no way the Patriots can win over this team or this team. That the Rams in that Super Bowl. I thought the Rams would win that. No way they beat the 2018 Chiefs. Their offense is too good. Chiefs were not too good that year. So every time I bet against Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, and the Pats, I was wrong. I'm feeling a little bit the same thing with this, but right now, my record with the Chiefs, betting against them, is not as bad as it was with the Patriots. I was I think 1 for 6 when I was betting against the Patriots. Not actually betting, but I would predict that they wouldn't win, and I was 1-5. That was my record against them. Right now, with the Chiefs, I'm currently 1-1. I said they would beat the Eagles. I thought they would lose to the Niners, but that didn't happen. That was depressing, but it's fine. Chiefs this year, I am saying, will not make the AFC Championship, because I think the Texans are going to surprise people. And I think the Bengals, when healthy, are better. On that note, we're going to go into our last segment of the show. Matt Judon is not pushing a new contract in Atlanta and stated that you can't demand something you haven't worked for. Pretty good quote, honestly. Maybe Hassan Reddick should take notes there, but yeah. I think Matt Judon was a great addition to them, like I said, and honestly, it's huge for the Falcons that he's not asking for a new contract, because that would kind of put a damper on their current hot streak. So, yeah, as I said, the Falcons, I think they were a division winner this year. Probably most definitely a first-round exit. But I think a playoff team because of their easy schedule, and I do think they have a better roster than the Buccaneers. So, yeah. On that note, this is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose Dylan, Google Podcast, Spotify, Spreaker, iHeartRadio. This is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose Dylan. Have a good day. I will see you tomorrow.